Trevor Ntlhola is a pastor of the Vineyard Church denomination. He's been working and studying in the area of reconciliation and racism. This climaxed in his relationship with the late apartheid Minister of Law and Order, Adrian Vlok. They both traveled across parts of the country promoting reconciliatory relationships. Trevor is again dabbling with the enemy through his continuous involvement with Betereinders. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Trevor Ntlhola.
Good evening. Molweni. Goeie, I know they start with goeie naand or goeie naand, right? Yeah, it's an honor and a pleasure to be here. I feel a little bit anxious, but I think I'll be okay. I have my family at the back. Please pray for me. I feel the faces here, they are very intimidating. I want to tell you, I've been enjoying. I'm sorry I'm the last one, so I'll try to finish quickly so that you don't fall asleep. I'm originally from Soweto. I became a Christian in 1984. So I've been a Christian for a long time. And the first time I met white people was when there was these two gentlemen who came to our school, and then so it was not, they were standing somewhere not far from here. And then for me, as a young black man, it was very interesting. Like I've forgotten what was going on. They came to preach in our school, and I couldn't believe that they were so white that I wanted to touch them. You know. And then they invited us to their church. So the church was beautiful. Then they invited us to their house. And then as we got into their house, we discovered they have so many rooms. They had a room called TV room. So we're shocked, like we asked for the whole day. This room is owned by the television. And there was another room called sitting room. So you just go there and sit. Then they have another room called scullery. So we ask, what is scullery for? Scullery, that's where the dishes and all this, they just sit there. And this room is owned by these dishes. So, and then I got older, and then I had a privilege to no longer be scared of white people. And then one day, the white people started to hurt me. I was young in Soweto, and then I was at a Bible college, trying to be a good black man, serving Jesus Christ. And then at our Bible college, maybe to put it straight, our church was a full gospel church. 1988, the height of apartheid, and we were expelled. And that was my last year. I was left with 3 months to finish. And they expelled me. So my mom was not a Christian, but now she's a Christian. She's with the Lord a few months ago. But then she was not a Christian. She said, how do you explain? You can't be a Christian and training to be a pastor and be expelled at a Bible college. And the reason I was expelled was not because I've stolen or killed anybody. It was because we stood against apartheid. Our story was on the newspaper. If you remember in those days in 1980, in the 80s, there were only a few newspapers. It was not like today. It was only printing media. There was not so much digital media like or social media as we have it today. So a story was on the newspaper, and I was scared. And then before I was expelled, we had to make a press conference anonymously. I was 19 years, 20 years. Think of a young 20-year-old young man, in the dusty streets of Soweto. Somebody told us your story is worth to be told. Because at that time, the liberation movement were banned and all that. So our story had to be told because it was only about church and all that. Then eventually, we got to a certain place in Braamfontein. And we had this press conference. You can imagine a young 20 years old, 19-year-old sitting there with all these mics. And then we refuse that he must have mics or only we want only they can take our statements without taking pictures of us, because I knew that we will be harassed. So our story was on the newspaper without our photos. And the gentleman who welcomed us in his office was one of yours, Reverend Utata Umkhulu Beyas Nodie. So I met an Afrikaner who didn't behave like a lot of Afrikaners, at least in my experience, who behave like a human being, like umuntu. Thank you. And he touched my life. But I didn't know it was Beyas Nodie. Only 5 years later, I read on the newspaper, this was Beyas Nodie. And then him and another gentleman, they used to do, the tall Afrikaner used to lead an organization called Kononia. You would know his name. Nico Smith. They organized an encounter in Soweto, and I was asked to come with Beyas Nodie. And here I am, tall, excited, walking with this man. And I had the privilege of being asked to get him to come and talk with a delegation that was from USA. And then when I spoke with him, I said, they would like you to come and address them. It was a huge delegation. I don't have to drop names, but these are respected people in the US. This was in Soweto. When I called him, he said, I'm not worthy for them to come in my house. I'd rather go to them. This was Beyas Nodie. Fast forward, one day I'm sitting again in Soweto. I'm sitting there in a church listening to, there were these Afrikaners who came to Soweto in 1988. Afrikaners in the 1980s, they don't go to Soweto. If they go there to, in those days. But these ones, they came to have church. So I was invited, very suspicious of them. And one of them did a powerful exposition on the book of Ephesians. Beautiful. I was struggling. And then I kept going to this church, but this was a 50% white, 50% black. So when the church finishes, I would walk out quickly because I couldn't trust these white people. In Soweto in 1988. And then after I was expelled at a Bible college, I decided I'm not going to back to that church. Because immediately when I was expelled, one of the leaders who happened to be an Afrikaner, Alexander Venter, said, we saw a story on the newspaper. We would like to talk with you. I said, now they got me. I will never come back to church. The Lord being the Lord, and then I started to miss the church. I started to have worship in my heart. I went back to visit the church. And they said, we've been wanting to meet you. Where have you been? Cut the story short. They said to me, if you really want to continue studying, we would like to help you. But on this condition, you must study. You're not going to be a priest without studying. Alexander Venter, tall Afrikaner, some of you might know him. I was 21 years, 22. He took me by the hands literally to University of Pretoria. And I got my first degree paid by the Afrikaners. Afrikaners can pay. They have money, I know. They paid for me. And I'm sitting in this church, and then I'm hearing the conversation. You see, we blacks are not racist. We are nice people. You know that. You live here. We always say Afrikaner, the ones are racist. Sitting there, one of the guys sitting in the black, his name is John Gosling. He says to me, he says to some of the guys in the church, They were talking and debating about some of the things. And the next thing he says, he said something that somehow the Lord used it. Because I was sitting there, 1988. And then the next thing in my heart, I got so angry, I had this venom, this anger. Do you remember I just told you we black people don't have racism? And then I stood up, I was given a chance to raise my hand. Before a few weeks before that, I didn't feel this anger, this venom and all this. And then he gave me a chance and I raised my hand and I pointed at that guy. It's unfortunate that today I've forgotten, and I'm happy that the Lord helped me that I should forget. I said to him, you must go back. This was a white guy in Soweto, 1980. You must go back to Europe where you come from. I didn't know who he was. I don't know, And then after a few minutes, got his chance because we were debating in the church. And then he said, I want to address that young man. I've never been to Europe. I would love one day to visit Europe. And this is my country as much as it's yours. That's what he said. And he sat down. The Lord used those words and he convicted me. And it was almost audible. He said, you are a racist. 1988. So I don't have a problem when people call me a racist. I think we are all racist. Being born in this country, having an attitude toward another person of a different color and all that. I just want to tell you, many of you Afrikaners, when somebody says you are a racist, you just shrivel and then you want to be defensive. God works with those who agrees that they messed up. For the first time, I cried. I've forgotten there were people around me. And I cried. And then I asked God to change my heart. And then I made this prayer that I don't want any of you to pray unless you mean it. Lord, change my heart so that I don't become like those people that have made me to be like this. And help me no longer to belong to a church that looks like me. I pray that prayer. When you hang around, people are black, speaking black, dancing black, everything black, you end up seeing anything that's not black as an enemy. Don't tell me you're not a racist until you cross the line and you stand on the other side. Don't tell me you don't hate black people or you don't hate white people until you cross the line, then you're on the other side. I know that. Don't pray that prayer that I just told you. Fast forward, I find myself pastoring a white church. You don't know white people. You don't know white people as a pastor until you pastor them. Oh, by a so colis. Utatalo puma Eastern Cape. You don't know white people. You must pastor them and you realize. The same way, go and pastor black people, you will see. They're very loud. We dance, you do all of these things. I end up pastoring that church. And I don't regret. The Lord changed my heart. It was during that time that I met a tall Afrikaner called Oosterlig. You remember the former minister of, what is it called? Law, they used to call law and order. And then we black people would laugh, Minister of Law and Order. Ha, ha, ha. God made me to meet him. It's a long story, but I don't want to go. So we walked around the country, some of the parts of the country. We would just sit and I would ask him questions. One of the stories I want to tell you that man, I have a high respect of Johan. Johan invited me. We went to the University of Pretoria. While we were sitting there, we have these Domini Afrikaner, and they're asking us questions. One of them stood up. He said, hey, Oosterlig, you have done this to my family. And he was an elder brother to Max de Vries. You remember Max de Vries, the famous Afrikaner journalist? And then, to cut the story short, Flock said, I've always wanted to ask for forgiveness to that family. And then he said this, African are strong people, they're powerful. But I was shocked. He said, Trevor, I'm scared of Max. Please, would you accompany me to go and meet Max? Because before I die, I would like to ask for forgiveness because I can see my days are closer. He had done that to Winnie Mandela. He had done to Bishop Tutu. He had done this privately. I'm talking about my journey with Afrikaners. And then eventually, we got there. And then, I don't have to tell you the details because of time. Then eventually, he knelt. He said, can I wash your feet? I had a privilege and honor as a black South African to see two generations, Afrikaners, reconciling, washing each other's feet. And then I'm asking you to stay in this country because your forefathers came here understanding that God called you to come and serve this country. And let me tell you, you're going nowhere. I'm going to pray. We are stuck here. We're going to make this country work. I'm staying here, 3 reasons. Because I work in a squatter camp. The young people that I've worked with, I'm still working with. 2, I'm staying here because I have a relationship with Johan's children. I don't know how to pronounce, how to pronounce, he doesn't know his 2 months ago, their cars were stolen. His wife's brother was sick overseas. I had to call him. So I have these relationships with them. The last reason why I'm staying is because I have a relationship with God. So the reason we're staying here as Christians is because it's a spiritual reason. So I'm asking you in the name of Jesus Christ, if God can make a relationship between me and Flock, surely God can change our country. May God bless you. Thank you.